You think you're watching this video by choice. You believe you clicked because something drew you to seek truth, to understand the world better. But what if I told you that your very presence here, your hunger for content that validates your sense of being different, being awakened, is itself a symptom of the addiction I'm about to dissect? You see yourself as the exception, the one who sees through the illusion while others scroll mindlessly. But Carl Jung warned us about this dangerous self-deception. He called it inflation of the ego, the belief that we stand above the collective madness when we are, in fact, its most devoted servants. Let me ask you something that will make you squirm. When was the last time you went an entire day without seeking external validation for your thoughts? When did you last sit with an uncomfortable emotion without immediately reaching for your phone, your substance, your escape route of choice? The uncomfortable truth is that you're not here to learn. You're here to feed, to consume another piece of content that makes you feel intellectually superior while changing absolutely nothing about how you live. You're an addict masquerading as a seeker, and the system you claim to despise has trained you to believe that consumption equals transformation. Jung understood something that modern psychology refuses to acknowledge. We don't become addicted despite our intelligence. We become addicted because of our need to feel intelligent, special, different. The most sophisticated forms of addiction don't look like addiction at all. They look like self-improvement. Carl Jung revealed that what we resist most violently in others is what we refuse to see in ourselves. He called this the shadow, the parts of our psyche we've banished to the unconscious, because they contradict our idealized self-image. And nowhere is this shadow more active than in how we relate to addiction. You see the obvious addicts, the ones with needles, bottles, pills, and you feel superior. But Jung would ask you, what is your drug of choice? Is it the dopamine hit of being right in online arguments? The narcotic of constant productivity? The intoxication of feeling perpetually victimized by a system you refuse to stop participating in? Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, shared psychological patterns that influence entire societies. What we're witnessing isn't individual moral failure, but a collective shadow projection. We've created a society where everyone points to everyone else's addiction while remaining blind to their own. The genius of modern addiction is that it doesn't look like the crude dependencies of the past. Today's addiction is sophisticated, moralized, even spiritualized. We're addicted to being right, to being victims, to being special, to being busy, to being informed, to being outraged. We've turned our very rebellion against the system into another form of consumption. Jung observed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So when you feel disgusted by people mindlessly scrolling social media, ask yourself, what is your scroll? When you judge people for binge-watching series, ask, what do you binge to avoid facing yourself? The uncomfortable reality is that the system isn't broken, it's working perfectly. It was designed by people who understood Jung's insights about the human psyche. Even if they never read his work, they know that humans will always choose the path that feels like growth while actually being stagnation. They know we'll always pick the addiction that makes us feel superior to other addicts. Your outrage about societal problems? That's your drug. Your consumption of content about how broken everything is? That's your needle. Your identity as someone who sees through it all? That's your bottle. And just like every addict throughout history, you've convinced yourself that your substance is different, necessary, even noble. Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the master key to understanding why intelligent, well-intentioned people consistently make choices that destroy them and everyone around them. You believe you choose your addictions, but Jung revealed that our choices are made by parts of our psyche we don't even know exist. Every scroll through your phone feels like a conscious decision, but it's actually your unconscious seeking relief from anxiety you won't acknowledge. Every purchase feels rational, but it's your shadow trying to fill a void you refuse to face directly. The most insidious aspect of modern addiction is how it masquerades as conscious choice. The algorithm doesn't force you to watch the next video, it simply presents it at the exact moment your unconscious needs escape. The platform doesn't make you argue with strangers, it just creates the conditions where your shadow can express its rage safely. Jung identified several mechanisms that keep us trapped in unconscious patterns. We see our own addictive behaviors as normal while condemning identical behaviors in others. The person addicted to work judges the person addicted to games, never recognizing they're both running from the same inner emptiness. We create elaborate intellectual justifications for our compulsions. I'm not addicted to social media, I'm staying informed. I'm not addicted to shopping, I'm supporting the economy. I'm not addicted to being right, I'm fighting for justice. The more we suppress our authentic desires, the more extreme our compensatory behaviors become. The person who's terrified of being ordinary becomes addicted to controversy. The person afraid of intimacy becomes addicted to the performance of connection online. But here's where Jung's insight becomes truly disturbing. These mechanisms don't just operate individually, they operate collectively. Entire cultures can be trapped in unconscious patterns, creating what Jung called a mass neurosis. We live in a society addicted to the illusion of progress while actively choosing stagnation, addicted to the feeling of being informed while becoming more ignorant, addicted to the sensation of being connected while growing more isolated. And the most terrifying part? We've created systems that profit from keeping us in this state. The platforms know that engagement, not satisfaction, drives profit. The news cycle knows that anxiety, not resolution, keeps you watching. The self-help industry knows that hope, not transformation, sells books. They've weaponized Jung's insights about the unconscious to keep you trapped in cycles that feel like movement but are actually elaborate forms of standing still. You want to believe the system is broken because a broken system can be fixed. But what if I told you it's working exactly as designed? What if the chaos, the addiction, the collective madness isn't a bug, it's the feature? Jung understood that human beings are not rational actors. We are driven by unconscious forces, archetypal patterns, and psychological needs we barely comprehend. The architects of modern society didn't need to read Jung to understand this, they just needed to observe what worked. Every platform, every product, every system that captures human attention has learned to exploit what Jung called our autonomous complexes, unconscious psychological patterns that operate independently of our conscious will. They don't sell you products, they sell you relief from psychological tensions you don't even know you have. The genius of modern exploitation is that it makes you feel like the protagonist of your own story, while you're actually just a predictable response to stimuli. You think you're making choices, but you're following scripts written by people who understand your psychology better than you do. Consider how perfectly these systems exploit Jungian insights. Every piece of content promises to make you the hero of your own transformation, while keeping you perpetually at the beginning of the journey, never actually reaching resolution. Platforms amplify your shadow projections, giving you endless targets for your unconscious rage, while ensuring you never have to face what's actually driving that rage. Social media lets you craft an idealized image of yourself, which Jung warned would inevitably disconnect you from your authentic self, creating an addiction to external validation. Dating apps exploit your unconscious projections about the perfect partner, keeping you swiping for an idealized image that doesn't exist while avoiding the real work of relationship. But here's the most disturbing realization: you're not just a victim of this system, you're its co-creator. Every click, every share, every purchase is a vote for the world you claim to despise. You are simultaneously the prisoner and the guard, the addict and the dealer. Jung wrote about the participation mystique, the unconscious identification with collective patterns. You've become so identified with being a conscious consumer that you can't see how your very consciousness has been commodified. Your awareness of the problem has become another product to be consumed. The system doesn't need to force you to participate, it just needs to make you feel special for participating. You're not mindlessly scrolling, you're researching. You're not addicted to outrage, you're staying informed. You're not consuming content about problems, you're raising awareness. Jung discovered that the psyche has an incredible capacity for self-deception, especially when it serves our unconscious needs. The most sophisticated addicts aren't the ones who've lost control. They're the ones who've maintained the illusion of control while being completely enslaved. You've learned to be addicted to your own resistance to addiction. You consume content about digital detox while never actually detoxing. You read about minimalism while accumulating more stuff. You study philosophy about presence while remaining completely absent from your own life. This is what Jung called spiritual materialism, the ego's ability to co-opt even the most profound insights for its own aggrandizement. You're not seeking truth. You're seeking a more sophisticated form of self-deception. You're not trying to wake up. You're trying to dream more beautifully. The most dangerous addictions are the ones that masquerade as solutions to addiction. The meditation app that keeps you dependent on external guidance. The productivity system that makes you addicted to optimization. The therapeutic process that becomes an endless exploration of problems without ever reaching resolution. Jung warned about this in his concept of inflation, the ego's tendency to identify with archetypal energies rather than being transformed by them. You don't become wise. You become addicted to feeling wise. You don't become conscious. You become addicted to the identity of being conscious. Here's the brutal truth. Your very attempt to understand this message is probably another form of consumption. You're not watching this to change. You're watching to feel like the kind of person who would change. You're not seeking transformation. You're seeking the emotional satisfaction of feeling transformable. Jung observed that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, but acceptance has been weaponized into another consumer category. You're not actually accepting yourself. You're consuming content about self-acceptance. You're not actually facing your shadow. You're collecting insights about shadow work. The system has learned to give you exactly enough insight to feel enlightened while keeping you dependent on external sources for that enlightenment. You become addicted to the feeling of almost understanding, almost changing, almost breaking free. And the most insidious part, the system makes you feel superior to people trapped in obvious addictions, while you remain enslaved to sophisticated ones. You judge the person addicted to substances while being completely dependent on the substance of your own self-image. Jung wrote about the collective shadow, the unconscious darkness that entire societies refuse to acknowledge. What we're witnessing isn't individual moral failure, it's a collective psychological defense mechanism. We've all agreed to participate in systems we know are destructive, because facing the alternative would require a level of consciousness most people simply cannot bear. You participate in the destruction of attention spans while lamenting the loss of deep thinking. You contribute to the commodification of human connection while mourning the death of authentic relationships. You feed the systems that exploit psychological vulnerabilities while positioning yourself as their victim. The uncomfortable truth is that you prefer your addiction to your freedom because your addiction lets you feel like a victim, while your freedom would require you to take responsibility. It's easier to be enslaved by forces outside your control than to admit you're choosing enslavement because consciousness is too demanding. Jung understood that most people will choose the familiar hell over the unknown heaven. You've become addicted to your own suffering, your own outrage, your own sense of being powerless against forces beyond your control. These feelings have become more familiar than freedom, more comfortable than joy, more predictable than authentic power. The system doesn't survive because it's imposed. From above it survives because it's chosen from below. Again and again, by millions of people who would rather feel victimized than feel responsible for their choices. Every time you consume content about how broken everything is without changing your own behavior, you're voting for the continuation of that brokenness. Every time you share outrage without taking action, you're participating in the very system you claim to resist. Jung's final insight was the most challenging individuation. The process of becoming conscious is not a gift or an accident. It's a choice that must be made repeatedly, moment by moment, often against every psychological force pulling you toward unconsciousness. You cannot wake up by consuming content about awakening. You cannot become free by understanding the mechanisms of your enslavement. You cannot transform by accumulating insights about transformation. The only way out is through conscious choice in each moment, choosing discomfort over numbness, choosing authenticity over image, choosing growth over the feeling of growth, choosing action over the consumption of ideas about action. But here's the final test. If this video ends and you simply move on to consume the next piece of content, then you've proven everything I've said about the psychology of addicted consumption. If you share this without changing your own behavior, you've demonstrated how we use even the most profound insights as another form of spiritual materialism. The question isn't whether you understand what I've said. The question is whether you're willing to stop consuming understanding and start living it. The question isn't whether you can see the psychological mechanisms that trap others, it's whether you can face the ones that trap you. Jung knew that the price of consciousness is the death of the ego's comfortable illusions. Are you willing to pay that price? Or will you simply add this insight to your collection of sophisticated ways to avoid change? The choice, for perhaps the first time in your life, is actually yours. But choosing requires you to stop watching videos about choice and start making them. Turn this off. Sit in silence. Face what you've been running from. The real work begins when the content ends.